Hi guys, welcome back. I'm here today with Alex London, the author of Black Wings Beating and the new Red Skies Falling.
Out today!
Yes!
Well,
so
I don't know when you're going to be watching this, but
it's
out.
Today when you can get it. It's awesome. It's a great series.
Thank you.
One thing that's interesting is you sort of center this complicated sibling relationship in these books, which is interesting. You don't always see that in YA, so I'm curious what inspires you wanting to do that.
For teenagers, especially for young people generally, often your primary relationship is not a romantic one. It's with your friends, and often if you have siblings, with your siblings. Especially in the case of twins, there's a sort of deep connection there, and it's one, like you say, isn't explored a lot in YA. I wanted to go into some of those, into the dynamics of that relationship and how complicated it can be with two people who are bound to each other by family, by history, by tradition, by real deep bonds of emotions, but also even if they weren't, they don't have a choice, they're family. That's really a relationship like no other. I wanted to explore that in Bryson and Kylie and in their dynamic, two very different people who are tied to each other by an invisible bond, and the fact that they're both falconers, the metaphor working there, you know, the falcon and the falconer are kind of tied by an invisible bond. And there's a literal one, there's like a little leash when you've got the bird on your fist, and it's like, but you unclip it and let them fly. And they come back to you because you've built that invisible bond with them. And siblings, it's kind of similar. My own relationship with my sister is far less fraught than theirs, and we're not twins. She's 4 years older. But it is a complicated relationship, and I could draw on, well, I didn't draw any of the biographical facts of our lives. I could draw on a lot of the emotional content, and much of Bryson and Kylie's relationship came from my relationship with my sister. There was a moment when we were little kids where she was doing some homework project, and I was doing some homework project, and she always colored like neatly in the lines, and it always looked great. And, like when she did Legos, they always looked like the picture, and I could never follow the instructions, and I got really frustrated and threw tantrums. And I always said, I'm no good at anything, and she's good at everything. And I was like inconsolable about it. And that dynamic poured directly into Bryson.
Interesting. I can see that. It's like, which is interesting because they have really interesting arcs in the second book. And, you know, I want to talk about that too, because in the first book they're together a lot, and in the second book they're separate, and they grow in, I think, different ways. And maybe they needed to be separate.
One of the challenging things with the trilogy is each individual book, the characters have to have some growth. But of course, if they grow too much, you've got nowhere left to go, and you've got many more books to write. So I knew that I needed to I couldn't solve all their problems in their lives in the first book. Which wouldn't have been realistic anyway. They had some big problems emotionally, and they both needed a lot of therapy.
Trauma,
So in the second book, it was a chance to let them figure out who they were without each other, or let them at least begin. I mean, it's a lifelong process, but let them each find out what healing looks like for them. And in a way, these books are all about trauma, in a sense. And first they had to, in the first book, figure out just who they were and what they wanted and their own power in their lives. In the second book, they now have to figure out, okay, who are they without each other, and what can they do with the power they've discovered, and what does that mean for each of them as individuals, not as Bryson and Kylie, but as Bryson as an individual and Kylie as an individual. And what happens when you want different things, or when you want the same thing but in very different ways, and you're on a collision course, which is what the second book is.
And it's set in this really interesting world that's kind of unlike other things I've seen. You talked about the falconry, the birds are a big part of it, so I'm curious what inspired that, like creating this whole world centered on birds of prey. And
birds are cool.
They are.
they're like little dinosaurs, you know? No, it started the birds. I mean, it kind of started with this vague notion that birds are cool. Like, I think I saw a picture somewhere of a really kind of hot falconer with like a falcon on his fist and no shirt on and like a cool tattoo. And I was like, oh, cool, I want to do something with that. And as I started thinking about it, I thought falconry would be a really cool way, like sort of milieu to set a fantasy world. And surely that exists. And it didn't. So I was like, I want to set a world around that. And sort of parallel to that, I was also thinking about a different way to tell the sort of fantasy hero's quest story, where usually in an epic fantasy, there's a quest where usually, you know, a guy, usually a straight guy, or sometimes a straight woman these days, has to kill a bunch of stuff. And that's basically like you're a straight white guy and you travel somewhere and you poke something with a sword until it's dead, and then boom, you win. And I wanted to find a queerer way to
Yeah.
tell that story. And falconry ended up being an amazing metaphor for that. Because in training a bird of prey, you can't force that bird to do anything for you. They're not like dogs. They don't want to please you. And if you make them mad, they'll fly away. They won't hunt for you. They'll fly away. Or they'll attack you and rip your face off. They're terrifying balls of rage and air with sharp talons. And so they, the only way to get a falcon to hunt and fight and kill for you is through paying deep attention to its moods, to its how much it's eaten, how little it's eaten. You have to control its weight. You have to control its desires. You have to sublimate yourself to it. They see so much faster than humans. There's no lag between when they see something and when they react to it. So the world is very overstimulating to them. So no sudden movements, no angry gestures. All of those things can set them off. So in order to train one, the only way to get a falcon to do the things you want it to do is through deep attention, deep gentleness, and deep care, essentially love. And in this world based around falconry, where the only way through power and violence, really, it is a violent world, the only way to master that violence, the only way to gain power in the world Black Wings Beating and Red Skies Falling is through the falcons. And the only way to master the falcons is through gentleness, care, and love. And so I wanted to tell a story where the way to power, where gentleness and love were not weaknesses, they were the source of your power if you could learn to master them. And so falconry became a way of doing that.
That's really cool.
But also birds are cool.
Right, birds are cool. That's true.
Another note about birds. My husband is terrified of birds, and it just seemed funny to spend 3 years working on a trilogy about birds.
Because why not?
Right? He did not want to come falconing with me for research, so I made my agent come.
So, well,
Yeah.
at least you have an agent
Yeah.
to do.
He had to, because he had to protect me
Right.
if a bird attacked me. It
That's
did not.
fair.
It all went great.
It's good to
But
hear.
it was his job. I told him.
Yeah.
If I get attacked by a bird, you have to. It's your job to.
Yeah. I was actually wondering about the research because there's so much there's so much detail
So
in this world.
I'm a nerd, so I started with books.
Same. I mean, that's what we do.
So I read H is for Hawk, which is an amazing memoir about training of a goshawk and grief, and sort of a mini biography of the writer T.H. White, who wrote The Once and Future King. He trained a goshawk and failed at it, spoiler alert, and wrote a memoir of it that was kind of one of his first big hits as a book, was his memoir of failing to train this hawk. And a lot of inspiration came from this book about that, H is for Hawk. It's a wonderful book. And then I read a bunch of nerdy falconry books and birding books, and then I realized I have to do it. There's no way to do this just off of books.
Right.
So I found a master falconer, which is a thing, and went out to his farm and had some birds leave me and come back, and it was the coolest thing
That's
I've ever
really
experienced.
cool.
It's really sublime. You just trust this bird to the sky and hope it returns to you.
Wow.
And you never know. This guy gave me his tamest bird, and he said, I know you're here for research for this big novelist guy, and here you are. Just want you to know I've had this bird for 17 years. This could be the time that he flies off and doesn't come back.
Wow.
It can happen any time. And I thought I wouldn't have fully realized what that felt like if I hadn't gone and done it.
Yeah.
And just the fear of that. It's like, is this the moment this thing I love leaves me forever, and I'll never know why?
And so much of that makes its way into the book. That's so interesting.
Because that sort of describes first love,
Yeah,
right? This other
absolutely.
mind you can't understand at
Right.
all that could turn on you and rip your
Right.
face off and break your heart or leave you forever, and you may never know why.
Yeah.
And any moment feels like that
Right,
could happen.
but you have to trust, or you never go anywhere. That's,
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. So, this is one thing that I think is great about it. You have with the twins, you've got queer representation with both of them. Whatever of that you want to talk about, but one thing that kind of stood out to me, I think, especially reading Red Skies Falling, that's interesting is with Kylie. She's this aromantic, asexual character. She's a woman, but she's not cold or dispassionate. Like, she has deep relationships and friendships and cares a lot about things. And so I just thought it was interesting how it kind of like does the opposite of what I think are sometimes some negative stereotypes.
Yeah, and I really, I know, especially when you're writing outside your own identity, you have to be very careful about accidentally treading into hurtful stereotypes.
Right.
And I feel like so often we read the ace character that's like frigid, cold, mean, somehow sexless means lifeless, and that's just not reality. I mean, I'm not ace myself, but I know people, and
same.
They're fully loving, fully human, fully realized people as they are.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote her as a fully realized person, as she is, as best I could. And I probably got things wrong. All people have. I have blind spots in my own identity. I am not Bryson. So writing his gay male reality, probably I still got things that are not true for other people's experiences. I did my best, so hopefully it worked. I never, neither of them are ever labeled, because I wanted to create a world that did not import our culture's hang-ups and policing of gender and sexuality. So this isn't a world where gender, sexuality, where those are the axes along which power moves. So none of those things influence who you are in society, how people relate to you, what you can or can't do, how you're viewed. Nobody really gives them a second thought. There are other things that police power in this world and your access to it. And it's a very cruel world. It's just not cruel about
in that
gender
way.
and sexuality.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's still a dark fantasy novel. It's going to be vicious. It doesn't have to be vicious in the way our world is vicious. And that was very deliberate on my part. I wanted, in order to create a more just world, you have to be able to imagine justice, right? And this isn't really my idea. So I wanted to do that work of questioning my own assumptions, my own ideas that I was bringing into my secondary world, and then trying to jettison them as best I can.
Which I love. I mean, fantasy is such a great opportunity to do that, I think.
Weirdly, I couldn't jettison capitalism. Looking back and reading it, I'm like, there's a market, people are buying things. There's no like investor class, I guess, but like even I, in trying, didn't manage to like escape that. So
yeah, that's interesting.
I gotta
There's always something.
Right? Like we're trapped within the system. It's hard to write outside of the consciousness you're stuck in.
Right. But I mean, I think that's true. Like fantasy is this opportunity to imagine a different world where things don't have to be the same. And this is such a cool example of that.
But it's been, I mean, especially with Kylie, readers have asked, like, is she romantic? What's her identity? I was like, well, I think of her that way, but like she doesn't think of herself that way.
But she's not interested.
She doesn't have a label.
Right. Yeah, there's not like but she clearly is like uninterested, especially I think in Red Skies Falling more so you see.
Yeah, I realized I needed to spell it out a little bit more. It was maybe a little too subtle, and I didn't want to do an injustice to people who were seeing it there but not sure. And, spending so much time of my youth reading queerness between the lines.
Like hoping that's what this is.
Let me make it a little more explicit. I think there's value in reading between the lines. I actually sometimes sort of miss it, like when I had to queer books for myself as a reader because the author wasn't going to do it for me because they never meant to. But I didn't want my readers to have to do that.
That's fair.
They can read classics to make, and
then
Mr. Darcy can be gay in your mind,
Sure.
Jane Austen wasn't going to do that for you. But,
no. I'm like just getting through a lot of my questions without having to look at it, which is great.
Yay! I like to talk.
Yeah, I love it. This is fantastic. It makes it easy because sometimes it's hard. Like talk more.
Whenever I moderate anything, I always have to. I make up so many more questions that I want to get to because I'm terrified that people are just going to sort of stare at me.
Right. And not say anything. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's see. These are interesting. Like you said, the world is really dark. You have a lot of morally gray characters, including like even the sort of villains aren't like necessarily like you can see where they're coming from. There's a lot of big themes you're exploring. Like what was it, especially with Red Skies Falling, that you were interested thematically kind of in exploring with?
I mean, there were a lot of things.
I'm sure,
It's a baggy monster of a book, but different ways of pursuing justice, I think, and different ways of defining and using power. Those were kind of big things I was trying to play with. I hope, though, that if I did my job, I just kind of told a good ripping yarn, and the themes are kind of there and the reader decides what they are, because I think anything I decided to try and do will not be as good as what the reader understands if I told a good story. Sort of like I had themes in my head that I was exploring, specifically power, healing, and just war theory, like when is it just and necessary to kill and to go to war. But that may not be what other people take from it, and that's, I think, totally fine. I think readers are far more interesting than a writer's intention.
I do think it's interesting because you do get the sort of war piece of it, and you get a lot of characters who believe they're doing the right thing but are at odds with each other, and so like they are doing what they think is the right thing to do, but is it, and what is?
Yeah, I mean that's the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, very few people. There are some, but very few people set out like, now I'm going to be villainous. Right. Now is the winter of our discontent. So you got like Richard III. He's pretty, and Iago, right? They're just vicious bastards. Right. But like otherwise, in real life, most people have reasons for doing things. Most people see themselves as the hero or want to, unless they're just total dicks. Which I guess there are some.
But I think that, and I think that's why, at least for me, I think it's like a powerful opportunity to think about like the way that we other people, like they're the enemy, they're the villain, but then you go behind the scenes and like, well, maybe there's more to it, even thinking politically and,
Yeah. I mean, that's what I hope, that, again, characters have reasons for doing things.
They do.
And it's hard with some of the lesser characters. How do you make sure that, like, anonymous henchman number 7 still feels like they have a reason for doing what they're doing. I feel like the extras in a book are much harder, actually, to write, because you want them to be coming from somewhere. You don't want them to just be like mindless zombies who get cut down. Unless you're writing a mindless zombie book.
I think you do a pretty good job. You've got a lot of interesting side characters that are pretty developed, and I thought it was good. I think the character works good.
It's hard. Next time I'm writing a book with 2 characters in a room, don't go anywhere, we'll just talk to each other and have feelings.
That's it, nothing else.
Because like some of the battles in Red Sky's Falling were so, I had to choreograph, I mean, not really a spoiler. There's battles in the air and on the ground simultaneously, and birds and kites and all. I had to like draw pictures. It was really hard to keep track of. Next time, 2 people having feelings.
Sure,
the whole book.
much easier, but less exciting. And speaking of which, like, you have a pretty wild ending, and I'm like going into book 3. I'm not going to spoil anything, but like, I'm like, where are we going?
I wish I knew.
How is that? Are you writing books?
Yeah, okay, so I have in my bag right over there, right behind the camera.
Exciting.
I have my edit letter on the first draft, and I have got 6 weeks about to turn it around and turn it back in.
Wow. Okay.
I know how it ends.
Okay. We don't yet.
Hopefully not. And it could change a million times. I don't really make good outlines, but I stick to.
That's okay. Well, and speaking of which, like, what is kind of your approach to writing, your process, and you have a new addition to your family recently.
Yeah, so I used to know what my process was, which I had a certain word count every day, and I would stop when I knew what I wanted to do next, so I would go into the next day motivated, and I wouldn't have to stare at the blank page. I always know, and I'd sort of write in the mornings, and then take a break, and then write in the late afternoon again. Yeah. Now that we have a 1-year-old, I don't know, I've been relearning. And it's been a really hard year, and I wrote this 3rd book differently than I've written a book. I sort of wrote it in snatches whenever I could, during naps, and when she was briefly with a babysitter, or when my husband was home. So it was kind of a mess. It took me longer. I used to be the write 3 novels a year kind of guy, and this was over a year now of working on it.
Kids change everything.
Everything. But she's just started daycare, so I'm just getting back into the revision. I hope will happen on a more regular work schedule. Because right now it reads kind of fragmented because of how I write. So I'm still learning. I am in awe of parents who write, just in awe of them, because it is hard.
Yeah.
And part of my brain was always on her. So even when she was napping or out of the house with my parents or with my husband, I was still thinking about her, which then I wasn't focused on the novel, and that's hard.
I understand. I have 2 small ones, so it changes everything.
Really does. Best thing ever, but not good for writing.
No.
At least right now. It will be.
Yeah.
I dedicated this book to her.
I saw that.
So y'all should buy it or she'll starve.
And follow him on Instagram. She's adorable. She's really adorable. Any advice for aspiring writers watching?
I mean, I'm skeptical of writing advice. Do what works for you, and be willing to let your routine change. If something isn't working that has worked before, change it up. That's fine. Don't stress too much. Whatever works. There's no shortcuts. You write one word after the other. You got to write your book because no one else is going to write it for you. No one else can. You're the only you in the world, right? So trust yourself, I guess. Write the book that's in your heart, even if you worry no one will read it. Some people will hate it. That's okay. Some people will love it.
Not every book is for every person.
That's why I have to remind myself. Some people hate this series, you know?
I love it.
I've made the mistake of reading Goodreads sometimes. And it can hurt. Especially so these characters, especially Bryson, are probably psychologically the most close to me of any characters I've ever written. Any character I've ever written. And so a lot of people hate him. Which he has a journey to go on, but it's really hard to read that.
Yeah.
But for the very same reason that some people hate him, some people love him. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, right. I wrote the character that I had to write.
I mean, he's like a real teenager who needs to grow up, and he is slowly. People make mistakes, you learn. He's a nice guy. He does.
He's doing his best.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's a great series.
So trust yourself, and that's that's really the only advice I have. Trust yourself and read a lot. Writers read. You learn stuff by reading. Some people get MFAs, some don't. But trusting yourself and exposing yourself to as many different kinds of stories are the only things that have worked for me. Anyway.
Awesome. So for Kylie and Bryson, if you were going to put them in Hogwarts Houses.
This is tough.
I know. I was trying to think
Gosh, they're complicated.
Yeah.
The whole nature of Hogwarts Houses is they reduce us.
I know.
So I think I am personally a Hufflepuff, which makes me just want to make everyone a Hufflepuff. But that's not a very Hufflepuffy thing. I want everyone to be sort of just where they are meant to be.
Yeah.
I mean, Kylie would be a Slytherin, I think.
I think so.
Not in a bad way, but she would do what needs doing. Mm-hmm. Maybe that makes her a Gryffindor, actually. She's a Gryffindor. See, she could
be either. She's like Harry.
Like Harry.
She's like Harry. She could choose.
Yeah. Bryson. Oh God.
I feel like he's a Hufflepuff,
He's a Hufflepuff
who wants to be a Gryffindor.
Yeah, that's it. That is it. He's a sad Hufflepuff
Yeah.
who is just, every time he sees those Gryffindor colors, he gets a little bummed because he really believes he should have been.
Right. Yeah.
He's like post-Harry, you know, so he knows who Harry Potter is. Harry Potter went through and he's like, that should be me.
Yeah.
Oh, but here I am.
Yeah. He needs his house pride, you know.
Yeah. And that's what really his journey is. He's a
yeah.
Hufflepuff learning to embrace his Hufflepuff nature.
Yeah, I love it.
And I think book 2 really, never thought about it this way before. It really is the story of him accepting that he's a Hufflepuff.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, you've just blown open book 2 for me. Thank you.
It is, no problem. Anything kind of what's coming next? Obviously, we have book 3.
Book 3, yeah, that's all I'm working on.
That's great.
There's maybe some exciting stuff happening with one of my past series, Proxy, which is a dystopian thriller that I might be creating some more content for in the future,
exciting.
which is fun.
Great.
And otherwise, I'm just hitting the road to talk about Red Skies Falling.
Okay, cool. Well, it's worth picking up, guys. If you haven't read it yet, read them. They're wonderful. Go buy them. They're available now.
This is out in paperback today, and this is out in hardback, and there's pretty maps, or a pretty map.
It's great.
It's not an entirely accurate map.
It's okay. Don't
pretty
tell
though.
them.
It's very pretty.
It's very pretty. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was
Thank you.
great. Yeah. So go check out the books. Check out everything. Like, subscribe, comment down below any of your thoughts. Let us know if you have read them and love them as much as we do, or I do. You wrote them.
They do a winged seer.
Yeah, that's just so.
And this is the curse. This is like giving someone the finger.
That's great. See, I love that there's like these little world building details that make sense. I love stuff like that. I think it's great. There you go.